I was president of Columbia Pictures years ago, and Frank brought me the rights to Lance's book, It's Not About the Bike, to make as a narrative film with Matt Damon attached, and we set about developing that version of the movie. We never made it for a bunch of reasons. And then when the comeback was announced, Frank and I got together and thought, you know, because we've been trying for so long to make this movie, and we were in awe of this guy, Lance, we thought, you know what, this is a great documentary. Let's forget that other thing that we were trying to do. Let's chronicle a year in the life of this guy and about his return when he was old. It was about cancer and all these things that we thought it was about. And so we said, who's the best documentary filmmaker that we know? And Alex was on top, right at the top of that list, and we called a meeting, and he came out and met with us.
I had done a 30 for 30 for ESPN,
right.
and Alex had also done one, and
right.
I had met him sort of on the road when we did them together, and I knew that he was a sports fan, and we called him and we said, you know, what do you think? And the thing we really liked was he was a sports fan, but he didn't know anything about cycling. So we wanted to get a broader approach to the movie. It wasn't an inside baseball kind of story. We wanted a broader approach. Who is this guy? And we also knew that he liked to delve into the real characters.
Oh, Alex is a tremendous researcher.
Yeah, absolutely.
Completely thorough.
And he was really initially fascinated by Lance's will. What made this guy tick? Why did he want to come back, as he says in the movie?
30 by 30, for those of you that don't know, is a television series for ESPN where noted documentary filmmakers have made sports-oriented type films, just to clarify.
And non-documentary filmmakers. I mean, that's sort of what's interesting about
Correct.
it. Correct.
Excuse me.
Not necessarily documentary filmmakers, people who have a passion for a certain moment.
I mean, people
in
like
sport.
you who aren't really documentary.
Like me.
we definitely were not. There was a lot in that movie about doping. You know, it wasn't as though Alex made just a love letter to Lance Armstrong. That was a movie that was very much about him and the inspiration of the comeback, but there were very sort of provocative interviews and implications in the movie.
Now, to just talk about that for a moment, was that a feature film also designed to go out into theaters?
Absolutely.
Yes, it started as a feature, and it was finished.
Feature documentary.
Feature documentary,
Yeah.
yes. One of the things we learned in all of this is if you see Alex Gibney coming up the steps to your house, don't let him in.
Whatever secret you're hiding.
Well, I don't know. I might think a little differently about that as a
no.
lady.
Maybe you don't have any secrets like the rest of us.
lady, yes.
But not with his camera.
Not with a camera. If he has a camera. Because what was interesting is he was asking all these questions to himself, but no one would go on the record. No one, not only was Lance lying to us all of 2009, everybody else was that was protecting him. All of the other writers. You even see Frankie in the interview when he asked him about 1999, he says, I'm not going to talk about it.
Even Frankie, who is the one he has really wronged in many ways.
Yeah. But that was, you have to remember, that was 2009, and none of this stuff had come out. The USADA report hadn't come out. So what Frankie was being asked at that moment was a big deal, and he just couldn't.
To break that code.
He couldn't.
Right,
he
the code
couldn't
was
do
still
it.
there.
But if you watch, there's an interview, if you remember in the beginning of the movie, not an interview, but a scene that we shot, and it's Lance and his lawyer and Johan Brunel. It's the inner circle of his advisors, and they're all talking about whether or not he's going to be allowed into the Tour de France. Right. It's a fascinating moment because, and it's very much what it was like to be around them. Nobody talked, the conversation wasn't, did he dope? It was he ever caught? That was always the dialogue. I mean, there was always noise in the air, but there was never anyone saying, well, dude, did you ever actually? Absolutely not. That was off the table. It was just a lot of conversation about, I've never been busted, and that person said I was, and I wasn't, and that test never, but nobody ever, it never came down to a confrontation. And, the truth is, Frank and I, we've said this, we were in that bubble. It was very intoxicating. I mean, when you were around him, he's a huge personality. And his story was so fantastic that when you were close to it, or even not that close to it, you just kind of wanted to believe in it.
Yeah, it's not really a story about doping. It's a story about, as we say, a story about power. It's a story about a person. It's a story about hubris. It's the anatomy of a lie. It's how was this possible for all of these years, for all of these people, all of these sponsors, Nike, Oakley, you name it, to have gone on this ride. And that's, I think, what the interesting thing about the movie is.
And coming away from that, do you think it's the power of one individual then that has that, so much of that in him?
Well, he was a rock star. I mean, his story was incredible.
It was a perfect story. I mean, you can't invent a story like that.
No.
So it was the perfect, he has the perfect personality to be out, to be the person, to be the lead in that story. It was just his bravado and his arrogance and hubris, all of it, it was sort of the perfect storm. It's not a cycling movie either. I think that, you know, one of the things that's been interesting, the audiences, the people that have come out, may never have gone to a bike race. That was always the case with Lance also. There were all these people who were suddenly like, my mom was watching the Tour de France. She didn't care about bike racing, but this guy was so captivating.
You had to completely re-edit the film.
Yeah.
So how much material in this was approximately from the original piece, and how much did you put in to have to reshoot and go back? Do you have
I say there's only about 35% of the original movie.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of it was, you know, the bike racing, a lot of the tour, a lot of that footage, obviously, was in it.
We have a great other movie. The story, which I love about making a documentary, other than my day job, where I know what's going to happen every day. You never know. So the story about Lance trying to win his 8th title turned into something very interesting. He wasn't going to win, and he was going to fight to stay on the podium. That was a whole new story. That was fantastic, too. And then when Matt and I flew to Austin a little over a year ago, and Lance confessed to us in person. It was
the most surreal night of our lives.
Amazing moment.
He hadn't talked to anybody.
Way before Oprah.
Felt compelled to come clean to us.
And we got on a plane the next day and flew to New York, met with Alex, and went to Sony Classics and said, we have another movie. Will you back us? And Michael and Tom did.
Yeah.
And the fascinating thing for us was when we then looked at the first movie, everything that was in it and a lot of interviews that weren't in it, when you look at them in the new light, meant something completely different. And that was fascinating. And because once we knew for sure, everything was different. Ferrari, for example,
I hadn't
completely
thought of that. It's
different.
Really interesting.
He always looked like he swallowed a canary to me. But now we knew. He was trying to tell us the story. I think the other thing that we've been asked in the last couple of weeks is, why did Lance let you do this? Well, I think it was because he thought he was going to race clean, so why not let them in? There's nothing to hide.
I think that's 98% true. I have this weird theory that most of it was hubris. Most of it is what Frank's saying, which is bring me your most...
Bring it on.
Yeah, your greatest journalist, whatever. I'll lie to him, I'll do anybody. Again, and you said it, it's Alex Gibney. And Lance did his homework. You know, when we said we wanted to hire Alex...
He always does.
They looked at all the movies, and we weren't asking permission, but we said, this is our guy. And they did like a little Alex Gibney film
festival. They're very smart. I mean, they're
very
people.
Yeah,
they
got
take
this
this
far.
stuff seriously. And don't forget, this is this story that he's been protecting with everything he has. So they're not going to suddenly flippantly let some guy in. They really checked out Alex Gibney. And they said yes. Like, you know, he could have said, well, you can't come into my house. You can't. I'm not going to. But he said, sure. There's a little part of me that thinks he might have just wanted somebody to like blow the doors off this thing, that very unconsciously, deep down, it was Alex Gibney. And of course it was going to come out.
We've been doing a lot of therapy in the last 2 weeks.
Frank and I. It's been very
now
painful
this
for
is
us.
where we've gotten to.
You know, the Oprah interview was like, okay, I'm going to go on there, I'm going to say what I need to say, and it'll be fine, right? It'll go away.
They'll forgive me.
And it
Yeah, that
couldn't
didn't
be
work.
further from what.
That was
what
the
you-
other incredible moment, was being there for that 3 hours in the room next door with his lawyers and his PR people and all of his inner circle, just watching this
Watching him
amazing
sink.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah.